I'm so excited to do this. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be starting a new project for a Halloween window display, and I put this to a vote on my Instagram page, and the vote came back, and by about 2 votes I think it was, the Alien Xenomorph egg and Facehugger won. So we're gonna go with that. I love the Alien movies. They're some of my favorite movies of all time. They're super scary, super creepy. The design for them is just phenomenal. I've loved H.R. Geiger stuff since seeing that movie. And yeah, I'm excited to get started and put a plan together and see what we can come up with. So let's get to the planning stage. As this is a window display, the window itself will set the scene. I think I'll make a base layer for our egg and scenery to sit on. This means that when we have our egg in the centre, it won't topple over and we can secure it to that base. I want to take the set for Aliens as inspiration and create a kind of backdrop for our egg to sit in. The egg will have the opening at the top, so these sections are going to be folded back and the inside will look different to the outside of the egg. We're going to add textures to the outside and the inside will have more of a fleshy tone to it. Now when it comes to our facehugger, I would love to start with it inside the egg as if it's just opened and going to be crawling out. And then we can create a way that will have it suspended as if it's jumped out of the egg towards the person looking in the window to give that really scary alien facehugger attacking mode. Now we have a rough idea, let's crack on. I made this template of the windowsill to give us a rough idea of how much space we have and how much room we can take up with scenery. To create our egg, we're going to use the good old-fashioned balloon and papier-mâché method. I'm just working out roughly the size of what I want the egg to be, and then we will tie the knot in the end and secure it down with some tape. Once we're happy with the shape of the balloon, we're going to start putting our first layer of papier-mâché on. I'm sure most people are familiar with papier-mâché, but if you're not, you take strips of newspaper and an equal mix of PVA glue and water, and then you paste this onto your shape, your balloon or whatever you want to do, and then wait for it to dry. So I've papier-mâchéed the first layer onto the balloon here, and we're going to leave this overnight to dry and come back to it tomorrow. Okay, slightly annoying thing. I think that the balloon I've used for the egg may have had a little bit of a hole in it because as you can see here, there's like a lot of rippling where it's drying. Now it might dry fine, I guess we'll see, but I don't think it's meant to be doing that. We'll see. So we had to redo our egg, unfortunately, because it had got a puncture in the balloon, so I'm a little disappointed, but we reused the paper and everything, so nothing went to waste, and now we have a proper egg that is not looking deflated. It looks much better. I'm going to do a couple of layers of papier-mâché on this, make it thicker, and then we will open it up and burst the balloon inside and then start to make it look like a real Xenomorph egg. So next I'm going to work on the base. I've got these huge pieces of polystyrene that we use for some packaging and some cardboard rolls and bits and pieces that I found lying around, bottle lids and that sort of thing. I'm going to try and reuse some of the rubbish that I have to create some textured layers and build up that alien world for our egg to sit in. So let's start rummaging through my rubbish to get some more bits and pieces. I didn't overthink where I was going to put these pieces. I just wanted to keep in mind the set for Aliens, so having panels and buttons and pipes and things. And I just used hot glue to attach everything. So I'm just going to keep building up these layers, finding more little bits and pieces, and then I'm going to put a base layer of black, I think, on it, and then we'll come back to the painting of the details and adding maybe bits of rust and some textures to it. Okay. Now that we have several layers of papier-mâché dried on our egg, we need to think about how we're going to create a base for it to sit on so it doesn't topple over. I've marked the centre of the bottom and the top to make sure I know where to cut the top and where to place the base on the bottom. I've used this piece of insulation pipe that I have lying around, and I think it'd be the perfect little base for us to attach to the bottom here. I'm going to secure this in place with hot glue. Having this base on the egg is going to make everything so much easier when it comes to decorating and painting, and even just layering up some of the textures. To create some ridges along the outside of the egg, I'm using more insulation pipe that I've cut into strips here. And then we're going to follow the curvature of the egg just like this. This will hopefully make it look more like the design of H.R. Geiger's egg, and also give us something a bit more secure to attach papier-mâché to that isn't going to get really wet or change the shape of the egg as it dries. Now that all the ridges are in place, we're going to use kitchen roll in place of newspaper to do some more papier-mâché around the edge of the egg and build up those textured layers. This particular layer is more to make sure that the ridges blend with the surface of the egg, and also to blend the base with it as well, so it doesn't look like it's just sat on a pedestal. So hopefully once we've got this done, that'll be the base of our next layer, and then we can build up the real textures after that. So I'm just going to carry on papier-mâchéing that part of the egg and try and get those textures in there. I'm going to build up some of the layers, and then we're going to cover the base as well. And then we'll see where we are at, and we'll maybe start cutting it from the top and adding some textures around that as well. But for now, we're going to start papier-mâchéing this. I'm taking strips of newspaper and completely submerging them into a watery PVA glue and water mix. This is creating a really wavy and uneven texture that I want on the surface of the egg. And then I'm layering the same with kitchen roll on top of that to make sure that all of those edges of the paper blend together and create this alien feel. I'm going to do this texture all over, including between the ridges and under it, and then lead up to the top as well. As the kitchen roll is softer, I'm trying to blend the edges into the surface of the egg so that it looks more organic. I don't want it to look like a pile of papier-mâché, although I'm sure until I paint it, it probably will. This mixture is really wet, so I was a bit concerned about it morphing the shape of the egg, and so this is why I haven't actually cut it open. I've kept the balloon inside to keep the structure sturdy while I'm doing this, and then hopefully when we open it up it'll be more secure and sturdy as this is dried. So we're back in the craft room today. There's a few things that I've done since last filming. So we've got the details now on our background pieces. I've started to kind of paint just with black acrylic, just to fill in all the little gaps and details, and then we are going to go in and like highlight some pieces so that they stand out. And then I've also done our first black layer on our Xenomorph egg. So next part we're gonna cut into the top, which I'm a little bit nervous about because it's kind of solid now and I hope it doesn't crack, but we're gonna open it up, peel it back, and then I've got something in mind for the inside of the egg flaps, I guess you would call them, but the opening of the egg. So we'll be doing that next. Thankfully, because of where the ridge placement was, I could work out roughly where the centre of the top was. So using a sharp scalpel and some scissors, we opened it up and bent back these openings. So I'm pretty pleased with how it's ended up opening up. It does look quite like the Xenomorph egg, so I'm delighted actually. And the structure has stayed pretty solid. So I just want to try and maybe open these up a little bit more, try not to damage what I've already done too much. And then I've actually got some, I think they were shoulder pads or some sort of padding. It's kind of foamy, so I'm going to try and attach these somehow onto the inside, and that should help sort of create that 3D effect and kind of make it look a little more like the inside of the Xenomorph egg. So that's what we're going to get on to doing right now. These pieces of padding were super fine. They were almost the exact shape I needed. I needed to trim them a little bit, but otherwise they fit in there perfectly. And the fact that I could have all 4 pieces out of the same type of padding was awesome. It just meant that I didn't have to worry about trying to use multiple pieces of material to make them look the same. And once they were secure in place, I was going to work on the edges, making sure that they would blend with the egg. Proudly showing my husband what I've achieved here. After picking some appropriate music to work to, I took some kitchen roll and the water glue mix and used that to create the edging on each of the sections. I covered each side of the opening with kitchen roll to make sure that the texture was the same throughout. Once this layer was done and everything looked like it belonged together, I just added another layer of black around the edge and to the inside to make sure it all looked the same. Okay, so I've got all of my background pieces and the actual Xenomorph egg all have a base coat of black paint, so we'll come back to those when we want to paint the details in, but now we're going to move on to making the facehugger itself. Taking a piece of cardboard and these 2 shoulder pads, I drew a rough outline of the shape of the facehugger, making sure to mark out where the legs would be. Bent a little bit of shape into it and then used these pieces of wire to make each leg. I think I made them a little bit long initially and so I had to cut them down. Just used hot glue to place these pads in place and then moved on to the legs, which I used the insulation foam I'd cut from earlier to pad them out. Just used a little bit of hot glue to secure these in place and then trimmed down the squarer edges and then moved on to securing them onto the facehugger. This was a little tricky as the wire itself was quite heavy, so I knew I had to try and find a way to secure these really in place. The hot glue did work, but I knew I would have to put something over them as well to really secure them in place. So the cardboard, and cut it to a shape and place that over the top, hopefully securing that a little more. Okay, so yesterday I managed to get the legs put on the facehugger, and now I'm going to move on to doing the tail. So I've done a little prototype here with a bit of the foam. It's singular pieces that I've kind of stitched together with wire, but I feel like there's the risk of it snapping and breaking easily. So I'm going to do maybe 1 or 2 more prototypes and then we're going to get on to making the proper tail, which should start making our facehugger look a little more how it's meant to look rather than like a spider. So we'll start doing those prototypes. I took inspiration from another YouTube video, which I will put a link in the description, where somebody made an articulated tail out of fabric. So I took this scrap, sewed down one side and turned it inside out, and was going to stuff it with some wool. This would then be the base of the facehugger tail. So I have the tail now. It took far longer and was far more difficult than I thought it was going to be. I think because I made it so skinny, it just would not get sort of stuffed with the stuffing very easily, and yeah, it just made it really difficult to put the wire and everything through it. But it is done. It does bend and sort of flex how I want it to, which is great, and it means that I can maybe sort of pose it in a certain way, which is great. But like I said, this is just a prototype. I'm going to put this sort of spinal column along it now and see how that looks before I decide if I'm going to attach this one, or maybe I'll make one just out of cardboard and see if that is a little easier. But after all the effort I've put into this one, I kind of want this one to work so bad, because, you know, it has that flexibility and it has that stability now that I've actually taken the time to finish it. But yeah, it was a task and a half, so we'll just sew up this end here and secure it, and then cut out some of the spinal plates and then stick them onto this base and see how it looks and see if it works. I took rough measurements from the back of the facehugger to start off the spinal plates, and then made these rough shapes just to see if they would work as the attachment for the tail. I cut them out and numbered them so that I wouldn't remember which order I wanted to stick them on, and I also needed to make sure there was enough that would cover the end of the tail so it would hide it and make it look like it was actually part of the tail. As you can see, I actually just went ahead and used this prototype tail. I didn't bother making another one. I put in so much effort into this fabric one, and I just had absolute faith that it was going to work and do exactly what I wanted it to. I gradually made these plates smaller and smaller and numbered them so I knew which order to stick them on at. Starting from the very tip of the tail, we started attaching these on with hot glue and then worked our way up to the base of the tail that was attached to the facehugger. I slightly overlapped them so they would have that spinal feel, and also when I bent it, it meant that you would still have that overlapping. I slightly underestimated how many plates I would need, so I did have to make a couple of extra towards the top of the tail, but once they were all in place and secured, it was starting to really come together. Once the tail was finished and in place with all the plates in line, it really started to feel like the character of the facehugger, so I was really pleased with how it was starting to look. The top of the facehugger has these kind of bony ribcage protrusions on the back of it, so I was trying to emulate that using these rolled up pieces of cardboard, just attaching them with hot glue and then following through the spinal cord with some more pieces of cardboard just to finish the details on the surface of the facehugger. Once we had the rough design and shape of the facehugger, next was to add all those textures. Using the same technique as I did with the egg, I just used kitchen roll and PVA and water mix to create a texture throughout the whole piece, making sure they all looked cohesive. This was quite a fiddly process considering how many legs I had to do and the tail as well, so it did take several days of doing layers and then letting it dry and then doing another layer and letting it dry, turning it all over and doing the underneath as well. And as the legs were quite spindly, I had to do several layers specifically on them just to fatten them up a little bit. Once I was happy with the textures and the thickness of all the layers, we could move on to my favourite bit, which would be painting and decorating. I started painting the Xenomorph egg. It had a great dark base, so I could bring up the lighter colours on top of that, doing a lot of dry brushing. So I started with a dark green. I put this light flesh tone over everything, but I felt like it was too pale, so I went over with this brown and just darkened it down a little and added a bit of depth. I painted the inside of the opening with flesh tones more pink and red, so it would look more organic and like the egg opening in the film. Next was the facehugger, and I started painting this really nice green base on it, but ran out of the paint before I could cover it all, so it ended up being a slightly different green as a base colour. I then used several different layers of flesh tones to pick out all those little details and all the ridges and details that were along the spine and in the legs. I added a darker flesh tone here and made it look a little more human in colouring, our own little Jonesy coming across the screen there, and yeah, this just made it look even more like the facehugger from the films. Once the flesh tone was finished, I actually felt like it was missing something and had some unusual yellow paint which I did over the whole facehugger, which made it really look like an alien and like it was from another world. And she's finished. I'm so pleased with how it's come out. I think the paint job on it looks really good, if I do say so myself. I'm really pleased with how it looks, and I think it's going to look awesome in our window at Halloween. Few things looking back that I maybe would have done differently. The size proportions of the facehugger compared to the egg are slightly off, so I know in the original design I wanted the facehugger to start in the egg and it jumping out, but the way I've done it, unfortunately the facehugger is a bit too big, and I think I would end up damaging it if I tried to get it in the egg. And also might not be able to get it out without damaging it, so they are going to be separate pieces. But I think the overall look of it all is stunning enough to make it look awesome and for it to have an impact in my window display. So without further ado, here is the final shots of my Xenomorph egg and facehugger.